Welcome to Inspire Campfire, a podcast where ordinary people tell their stories of extraordinary adventure. These are campfire stories meant to inspire the rest of us to light the fire within, get outside, follow our dreams, and return to tell our own stories. Ready? Let's strike the match.
Welcome to today's show. Today we're going to be talking to someone that could easily occupy a whole lot of episodes on this podcast. And after checking out his social media and seeing all the adventures that he's taken, it was actually hard to decide on just one adventure. But among his many adventures, today's guest, Derek Wood, also known as Matador, has recently completed a thru hike on the Pacific Crest Trail. And that's going to be the focus of our attention today. And I'm super excited about it because the more I learn about the trail, the more I want to get out there and hike it myself. So just a real quick recap for anybody that's unfamiliar with the Pacific Crest Trail. Thought I'd share a few key stats from the Pacific Crest Trail Association website. So it's a trail that extends from Mexico to Canada, and it passes through California, Oregon, and Washington. It is 2,653 miles long, and it is both a hiking and equestrian trail. So along the way, it goes through 25 national forests and 7 national parks. It includes elevations of just above sea level all the way to 13,153 feet in the Sierra Nevadas. There are millions of visitors hit the trail every year, but only about 5,000 people obtain permits to thru hike. And this year, Derek Wood, who is our guest today, was one of those brave people. So Derek, welcome to the campfire.
Hey, Scott. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Oh my gosh, man. I'm so excited to just talk about this adventure and many of your other adventures. So one of our recent podcast guests who climbed Mount Everest, Taylor Grist, introduced me to you because you also have climbed Mount Everest with him. And this, what we're going to talk about today, was essentially part of your training for that journey.
All right. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So if you could, let's just jump right in. I want to find out a lot about you and your day job and your day life, but let's just jump right into the trip itself. So can you tell us a little bit about the Pacific Crest Trail?
Yeah. So the Pacific Crest Trail is located on the West Coast. You start on the Mexican border in Campo, California. And it's around 2,650 miles all the way from Mexico to the Canadian border in Washington. And it takes you anywhere from starting in the desert to the High Sierra Range, into like the Northern California area. And then from there, Oregon and Washington, which are kind of more volcanic areas. So for me, what was interesting, there's like a lot of variety on that trail compared to some of the other big trails in the US, like the Appalachian Trail. And so, yeah, that's kind of what it takes you through.
Yeah, and some unexpected terrain as well. Like when you and I first spoke, you were telling me that at the start you were going through the desert, but you experienced some weather that one wouldn't necessarily equate with the desert.
Yeah, a lot of people think of the desert as this dry, kind of tumbleweed cactus area, but it's like the high desert in California. And so I think it was the second or third day out there, it actually snowed on me, and we had to take cover in this lodge area in Mount Laguna to kind of get a break from the snow. A lot of us weren't expecting that early. And there's some days, where it got down to like just 1 degree with wind chill, and there's waist deep snow in some parts in the desert. I started early, so there's a lot of like hardships there in the beginning, just not expecting that in the desert like that. So
that's crazy. So what time of year did you start?
I started March 1st, which is the earliest permit date you can start on.
So snow in the desert in March is possible.
Yeah, definitely.
Wow.
Even later in April and May, you can still get snow out there too, I've heard.
And along that trail, you're also hitting portions that are like 100 degrees. Like, how do you pack for those such extreme temperatures? And you're carrying everything in your pack.
Right. So yeah, starting out, I had a 10-degree quilt to help me keep warm at night. And like I said, there was some days where you're like waist deep in snow trying to hike through a mountain pass. And then coming back from Nepal, it was like a total 180, and there was like a heat wave that I hiked through in the desert, and it got to like triple digits for 3 days in a row. So I went from, freezing, waking up to frozen shoes and socks and trying to deal with that kind of scenario to coming back, trying not to pass out in the heat, because in some parts of the desert, there's just Joshua trees and there's like hardly any shade. So you really don't have any reprieve from the desert sun and those extreme heat waves. So yeah, both ends you can deal with that in the desert.
Yeah. So does the trail go through Joshua Tree?
It goes near Joshua Tree National Park, but it kind of cuts to the west of there. So you kind of go in between Palm Springs and west of there. But there are northern parts of the desert where you start seeing a lot of Joshua trees everywhere, so you kind
Yeah.
of get that experience.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite national parks that we got a chance to visit. So beautiful out there.
I will
So
say you go through many national parks on the trail, which is awesome.
yeah, it said 7. I haven't had a chance to look and see which ones, but I mean, I have a goal to try to hit all the national parks, and so hey, that gives me the opportunity to knock out 7. That's pretty cool.
Oh, it helps, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So how long did the whole trail? How long did it take you to through hike?
So it took me 120 days, so around 4 months from start to finish.
Okay, and you had a little break in between there.
Right, and I had a 2 month break going to Nepal for trying to climb Mount Everest. So that definitely added on, but if I was to exclude that, it was under 20 days.
Yeah. I mean, that's so a month or so of the trail, then heading off to Mount Everest, and then
Hmm.
coming back to finish things up. I mean, what an epic year.
Yeah, it's definitely a journey. I think I saw a lot of shock faces when I told people come back where I just came from. So
it's it's incredible. So I definitely want to come back to that and just talking about the year itself and how you got there. But let's keep going on the trail. So what were some of the major highlights for you on the Pacific Crest Trail?
oh, there's so many. So definitely the desert, I think a lot of people kind of put down in their mind that they're not going to really love the desert section. And definitely coming back, even though there were some hot days. There's just a lot of beauty out there. I remember there's one section you cross the road and like just the local like flora just changes immediately.
Yeah.
You see all these different types of cactus out there that you don't see in other parts of the desert, and it's just pretty wild looking cacti. Some of them look like like sea kelp where they stretch way up in the air. Um, there's some really pretty mountains like San Jacinto. They get to go up and around. And then just in the desert, it's so dry out there too. You can just see for miles on end sometimes. So you just get this really awesome sweeping views. So I really actually love the desert section looking back, even though there are some really tough days, both cold and hot.
Yeah.
And then going north of there, so Mount Whitney, the trail goes right by there. So a lot of people take an alternate path to go summit Mount Whitney, which is the highest mountain in the continental US.
Okay.
So that's really exciting. So me and my trail family went up there starting at 2 a.m. in the morning to summit for sunrise. And that was definitely one of the most special moments on the trail for me.
Wow.
Just amazing views from up there too. And then going further north, just the whole Sierra Mountain area, some of the lakes you pass are probably like some of the most pristine, prettiest lakes I've ever seen in my life. And there's really hardly anyone out there to experience it. So you almost have all these lakes to yourself. And you can take a break in the middle of the day or in the morning just to go for a dip in these alpine lakes. And yeah, it's just gorgeous. And then going north of there, even, a lot of people like struggle in the Northern California area just because coming out of the Sierras, it's kind of like a little bit of a letdown.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still some really pretty areas in Northern California. You go through Lassen Volcanic National Park.
Nice.
So it really starts getting more volcanic in Northern California as you get closer to Oregon.
Okay.
And that was really cool to see. The Lake Tahoe area, like one of the prettiest lakes I got to, go swimming in was Lake Aloha. And me and my friends stopped there to have lunch and go swimming. And that was probably my best swim day on trail. Just a really gorgeous lake with these rocks out in the distance that you can swim to. So that's definitely as I hike the trail, there's places in my mind where I really want to go back there one day.
Yeah, you're
and do
really
like a
selling
weekend
it.
trip.
You're
Because
selling it to
there's
Tahoe.
times on the trail you feel like there's a hand pressing on you, and it's just you just got like this pace you have to set, and you need to keep walking. So you don't have a lot of days where you can just take 3 days in a spot you really like and just hang out. Because there's fires you have to worry about. There's snow in Washington potentially, so you're always kind of like setting a pace and hiking a certain amount of miles a day.
So
But then going
can
further
I stop
north,
you there real quick? Because I wanted to
yeah,
ask you about that. Like, I think you told me 4 months, and I just did the math, like 2,600 miles. Isn't that like 25 miles a day or something like
yeah,
that?
you become like a super athlete out there. And that's in regards to anybody because you're hiking pretty much all day long from when you wake up to basically sunset.
Yeah.
So I mean, just from the amount of fitness you gain, you kind of become like a super athlete, which is really cool out there. And there'll be days where you're hiking, a marathon a day or like a 50K a day. And then some people would actually do like 24-hour goals or see how far they can hike in 24 hours. And sometimes they do 70 or 80 miles. So yeah, definitely you can do a lot of miles in a day, and that's pretty impressive to people that aren't familiar with through hiking.
Well, you mentioned that, there were times when you would take a couple of days off of hiking. And so I'm thinking, an average of 22 miles a day, if you're taking some time off, that means you're doing a lot more than that on the days that you're hiking, which is
Oh,
really,
definitely.
it's intense.
In the
But
beginning, though, obviously you're kind of not in shape for that. So the beginning's a little bit rough and a little bit slower. But once you hit your stride after the first week or two, yeah, it's easy to do a marathon or 30 miles a day, especially with how much sun you have in the summer.
I feel like
Because your
that's an
mission every
important,
day is just to
yeah,
hike, you know?
I think that's an important point for people to hear because what I just heard you say was, you're not really in shape for it when you start. But just
Hmm.
naturally, because of the length of time that you're doing it and you're doing it every day, like you get in shape on the trail. So, I mean,
Yeah,
do you have to be in shape to start?
definitely not. I've seen all sorts of varieties of people out there that start the trail. Some people, are just like tired of being like out of shape and overweight in their life, and this is like a way for them to finally like focus on themselves and get in better shape. And so I've seen some people that start out the trail like obese, and then at the end of the trail they have like their post finish picture and they've lost like 70 or 80 pounds, and they're super fit. I've seen even like little kids out there and stuff like in the trail, like down to even 4 years old. So
Yeah,
I think the trail is really for everybody, and that's what's kind of exciting. All backgrounds of people.
man, it's amazing. So as you get up into like Oregon and Washington, what was it like up there?
Yeah, so then it starts getting really volcanic. Oregon's known as kind of like the flatter section where you can really knock out a lot of miles. But for me, I didn't want to do these long mile stretches because I want to take my time and enjoy it some more.
Yep,
But you get to the Three Sisters area where you start seeing some big volcanic peaks. And then in northern Oregon, you get to Mount Hood, which is this pretty big volcano,
yep.
and you go right around it. And then, so that was really neat. And then also in Oregon, probably my favorite place on trail entirely was getting to Crater Lake National Park.
Yes.
You hike over this rim, and then all of a sudden it just opens up, and there's this huge lake, and it almost looks like an alien landscape. There's like this giant lake, and then this crater. There's like this Wizard Island, is what it's called, in the middle of the lake, and it's just really wild. And you get a hike along the rim of it. And so that was probably my favorite section on trail, just because of how unique I thought it was.
Yeah,
Uh,
my family lived in Oregon when I was really small, and there's a picture of me sitting right next to Crater Lake as a little kid, and so I've always wanted to go back there. That now you're just giving me more inspiration to go recreate that picture.
Yeah, and almost everyone take it's actually an alternate. It's not the true PCT, but it's I guess because it's not meant for horses and it's a horse trail.
Got it.
But pretty much everyone I knew took the alternate just because of how spectacular it is.
Yeah,
And you get to hike part of the rim trail, which is really exciting too.
yeah. So
And
you
then
mentioned
okay,
your trail family. Tell me about that.
yeah. Yeah, so starting out, I was really worried honestly because I was all by myself. I didn't know anyone out there. And so I think this is a way like people shouldn't worry about too when they hike on the trail. You're going to meet so many people and everyone's super friendly. They're out there with the same goal, just want to be outdoors and enjoy it and hike. So it's really easy to make friends on trail. But yeah, it was my first night and I was really scared about sleeping by myself that first night, about mountain lions and all sorts of animals.
Mm,
But these hikers ran into me that night and we spent the night together. They had been through hiking other trails too. They had been on the PCT before. One guy was a triple crowner, so he had done the CDT, the AT, and so I kind of fell in with them and really enjoyed hiking with them and made friends with them. And so I stuck with them for the first 300 miles. And then I got to mile 400 and I left to go to Nepal. And so coming back again, I didn't know anyone and I was at that phase again.
yeah.
But the first trail town I got to was Tehachapi. And I ran into a hiker in town and he invited me to dinner. There's probably like 30 or 40 hikers at this dinner. And so I made a bunch of friends there and then actually met a couple of them back on the trail when I got dropped off by a hitch. And I ended up sticking with them for the next like almost 2,000 miles. So yeah, I would say it's just really easy to meet people of all different backgrounds out there. And you never really have to worry about falling in with a trail family.
Yeah.
You'll
Oh,
find your right people and you'll stick with them the whole way.
that's super fun. The sense of community out there. So tell us about the name Matador. How did that come to be?
Yeah, so starting out on the trail, there's a couple of names that I was kind of trialing out, but none of them really stuck. But then I went to Nepal and we kind of had the same tradition of trail names out there. And so we were hiking up to Everest Base Camp, and there's these animals called zokios. It's kind of a breed between a cow and a yak, and they're really friendly, kind of docile animals, and they're at the lower elevation, so you don't really have to worry about them. But as you go higher up, it's where yaks are more working because they can deal with low oxygen environments.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we were hiking, I thought there were Zokios, and so I started hiking up towards them and got in the middle of them. And my guide was behind me and saw what was happening. He's like, "Derek, get out of there!" And so I was like running away from all these yaks down the hill because yaks can be deadly. They can be kind of aggressive. They can turn on you and gore you with their horns. And so he started calling me Matador after that, and it kind of just stuck.
That's a
And
perfect name, Derek. I
it
love
kind of had a
that.
good story behind it. And so, yeah, I just kind of rolled with that when I came back from Nepal.
I love that. Taylor Grist was on this podcast and he didn't tell me what his trail name is. Are you going to divulge that?
I'll let him tell the story.
Okay. We'll have to circle back on that. That's awesome. One thing I noticed when I was looking at the Pacific Crest Trail Association's website, something caught my eye. It said that there are stretches of the trail where there might not be water for 30 miles for up to 30 miles. I was just curious, how did you deal with the water situation?
Luckily, there's an app I use called GutHooks, and it basically shows you all the water sources along the trail. And the best part about it is it leaves comments from users. So you can basically comment on a water source and say it's dry, or, hey, this trail angel left, 10 gallons of water here and there's 5 gallons left. And so it updates live. And so you can always check that to make sure there's water ahead somewhere. But there's definitely stretches in the desert where you really have to worry about water supply. Definitely out to Hatchby near Walker Pass. There's probably like a 20, 25 mile carry day where you had to carry water for that length of stretch because there was no water out there. And that was also that section where there's triple digits and it was a heat wave. So that was probably the hardest section for me dealing with heat.
Dangerous.
So it's definitely something you have to be aware of. And people think if you're hiking every day, it's really easy. You don't have to plan ahead. But there's definitely parts of like the water supply situation and food where you really have to, do some planning and know where you're going to restock on those things.
Yeah, but man, it's a little different now than it might have been 20, 30 years ago. There's an app to find water. What was the name of that app again?
Yeah, so GutHooks is probably the most popular app that people use out there. It shows you everything from camping sites to, where you can get water. It has comments for trail towns of different things you can go see for restaurants, grocery stores and things like that. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it definitely changes everything. It's really useful. I've met some people that are more purists out there that don't like to use that. They prefer paper maps because definitely using GutHooks, like an app like that, can kind of spoil things for you.
Yeah.
But it's also a super useful tool. And so I think it really depends how you use it,
Well, you find yourself in a place where you don't have any water. It's a pretty good option to tap into. So one thing I wanted to ask you about was you mentioned the first time that we spoke that the way that the trail was designed, that there aren't any really aggressive slopes. So I was curious if you could kind of tell us about that. Like, how technical is the Pacific Crest Trail?
It's really never that technical because it's designed as a horse trail to begin with. Mm-hmm. So the steepest grade you'll ever encounter is 20%. So there'll be times where you have to there's some high elevation out there. You're going up to 13,000 feet at the highest point. But because it's so gradual, it's never really that difficult. The Appalachian Trail, I've heard, is actually more difficult just because it gets pretty steep out there. And there's parts where you're scrambling and using your hands. There's ladders. But on Pacific Crest Trail, it's totally hikeable. You can hike the whole entire thing, and it's never that steep. It's only 20% grade at the highest.
So beautiful out there. It's just something I'm super inspired to try to do. Did you have any wildlife experiences? You did mention a little fear of mountain lions.
Yeah, but I never saw one. And if you get in your tent at night and you're not hiking at night, you never really experience mountain lions. It's only really if you're hiking at nighttime you might see them. But even then, they don't really want to mess with you. But definitely, I saw a lot of bears, brown bears in particular. In the Sierra Range, there's some bear encounters, and I think the reason why I had a bad experience with bear in the Sierra just is because they have these bear cans, bear boxes that you can store your food in, and some people just leave their trash there, and so the bears will kind of hang around there trying to get food, and sometimes they're so used to humans that you can't really scare them off very well. So I had one issue with the bear at a campsite, but there were so many other people there I felt safe. And then going further north, I saw some mama bears with their cubs. And luckily had some people in my trail family around me at the time, so I felt safe there too. Yeah. And then one night, you kind of get complacent out there, and I had my headphones in, and I was hiking by myself, and I turned a corner, and all of a sudden this big brown bear is maybe 10 feet from me. And we both stared at each other with total shock, surprised faces. I think we both, shocked each other.
Yeah.
But I realized it took me a while to respond, but I finally made some noise, and he like looked really scared at me, and just like charged downhill. And man, he went super fast, like 30 miles an hour down this hill,
Wow.
like stomping on tree logs and stuff. And wow, you just realize how fast a bear can run, and you
Yeah.
realize why you never run from a bear. You should,
They can go
definitely scare them
faster.
instead, because they can definitely outrun you and catch up to you. So
Yeah. So are you carrying bear spray?
no, most people actually never carry bear spray out there.
I,
It's pretty rare to see. Uh, and everyone I talk to, they may have had some close encounters with bears, but never had any big issues.
got it.
I think the scariest thing I heard was this woman I was hiking with, Bambi. She had a bear come up to her tent at night while she's sleeping, and she just heard this like breathing noise like on top of her head.
Oh,
And at first, she freaked out and was screaming, and the bear wasn't moving. So she had to like kind of like get up and make a lot of noise and try to scare the bear off. But once she did, the bear left her alone.
yeah.
So it's just how you deal with the situation.
Yes.
But you never have to worry when you're out there.
Yeah. It's usually the people that are just being, leaving food out and not being
Right,
responsible about it. Right.
right. And you need, yeah. So you look that stuff up and you treat the trail right, and you're not leaving trash around.
Right.
You don't have to worry about those things.
Yeah. So one of the things I love talking about with people in these kinds of adventures is I just kind of have this fixation with the word awe. And when I started this podcast, I looked it up, and the definition of the word awe on Google, their online dictionary, is a feeling of reverential respect mixed with fear or wonder. And I just have to imagine, like I was just envisioning, you said when you climbed Mount Whitney and you saw the sunrise, I have to imagine that you just had like an abundance of awe experiences out there.
Oh, definitely. You're just in total shock of what you're looking at, trying to process all of it too. Just because, like, yeah, it's so dry out there on the West Coast that you can just see for miles and miles at a time. So there's definitely moments like that where you're just like, how do I take all this in and appreciate this moment?
How do you do that?
It's tough. You kind of just try to sit there and soak it all in, and not really focus on what's ahead. Just trying to like soak up those moments. And then for me, just taking pictures of me and my trail family at these places, so you can look back later in life and like try to reimagine and relive what you went through. It's super helpful in the future too.
Yeah. It's hard to do though. I remember we did an RV trip to the Canadian Rockies at one point, and I remember taking pictures of these majestic mountains and then looking at the picture and thinking to myself, like, this
Yeah,
doesn't even come close.
I know it doesn't cut it, but at least it kind of maybe triggers your memory of that
Yeah.
place, and things like that.
You have to experience it, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, pictures don't do you justice, I would say.
No. So, I mean, what an epic adventure, and then throwing Everest in there. Can you tell us a little bit about like Derek before all this adventure, and then like how did you get into this adventure spirit and start doing these kinds of trips?
Right. So like graduating from college, I went on my first backpacking trip, which was in Scotland on the West Highland Way. It was like a 96-mile adventure. So it was my first like multi-day trip like that, but we stayed in bed and breakfasts and hotels. So it was kind of like an outdoor experience, but it was really like gentle. And then from there, I just really fell in love with being outdoors for long stretches like that. And so I found Kilimanjaro actually when I was looking at for my next trip, and that is like a 7-day trip going up to Mount Kilimanjaro, the highest mountain in Africa.
Yep.
And so that was my first real mountain experience. And I just had the time of my life out there, and I was like, I need to find ways to do more of this. And so yeah, I found more and more mountain trips to go on. And then finally, it just I kind of worked up to it, but I was like, hey, maybe I can do the Pacific Crest Trail. I had heard of it before, but I always thought it was kind of like far off, like something I wouldn't be capable of doing. But then I was looking for ways to train for Mount Everest, and I was like, hey, maybe I can accomplish another life goal by going on the PCT for a month beforehand.
Mm,
I could, hike every day, and that would give me really good shape. You're at high altitude at times, and it just made a lot of sense in my mind. Like, hey, I can do both these goals at once if I take time off.
yeah, that's amazing. So if I go back, it sounds like the Scotland backpacking trip was sort of the trigger for this lifetime adventure.
Definitely, yeah.
What called you to that trip in particular?
Well, I was trying to do something, kind of adventurous. I'd always kind of been scared of actually flying on planes and things like that, but my
Okay.
family had gone to Europe when I was in college. And yeah, I decided, I kind of made an excuse. I was like, hey, I have summer classes, I can't go. Um, but then actually I had a kind of a bad experience with my family, but my mom passed away. And
Mm.
so I never got to go on that Europe trip with her. And so that happening kind of made like triggered me and, made me kind of realize I should really get over my fears and really go see the world and travel. Um, and so after she passed away, I was looking for maybe like a kind of international trip to go on. And because I missed that Europe trip, I was trying to find a trip in Europe to go to. And I found the West Island Way and it just made a lot of sense. And that was my first international flight. And I kind of got over that fear. And ever since then, I've really taken on to traveling. And so a lot of times you just got to get over those fears and go see the world and adventure. It's worth it
Mhm.
in the end.
I have to tell you, when you told the story about your mom passing away, man, I just got chills like that.
Yeah.
And that was a trigger for you to get you out
Sometimes you
on
need a
that
moment in
trip.
your life like that pushes you to do things that you don't think you're capable of. So,
Yeah. So what happened in Scotland that, I mean, obviously you went on that trip and you were hooked. Like what happened in Scotland?
yeah. So in Scotland, you basically kind of like on the PCT, you're basically just waking up in the morning, eating breakfast, getting on trail, and just kind of hiking outdoors all day long, and then settling in at a place for the night, and then kind of waking up and doing all that over again. It sounds super simple, and maybe it's not for everybody, but just all the places you get to see while hiking is just really breathtaking and life-changing experiences. I know it's something you can't do in the normal day-to-day life. So you definitely appreciate it while you're out there.
Yeah. I just wonder what it is about that experience that's just so, I mean, it's addicting, isn't it?
It is kind of addicting. You're always chasing that next thing, like totally different terrain or new places you've never seen. Like you kind of just want to experience that and see everything and really just a sense of adventure.
Yeah. But
I
what
mean,
is
there's
it?
places on the PCT, if you think about it, like there's really no access to these trails. So like the day-to-day person, day-to-day hiker is never going to see these sections of the Sierra. So unless you through hike, you're seeing all these special places that a lot of people in the world never get to see. And I think that's really special.
Yeah, and like, but what is it about the nature side of it? Like, what is it about nature that's so
Mm.
addicting, or just like, what is it that calls us to nature?
Maybe it's just going back to our roots, like it's something that, humans didn't build and maybe that makes you appreciate it more. It's just natural wonder
Yeah.
and you
So,
just feel more peace with yourself out there too. It's just peaceful.
at peace. Yeah, it's true. You feel at peace out there. The Pacific Crest Trail and the Everest experience, were those your longest adventures?
Oh yeah, definitely. Because before I was able to take, vacation at work to go on trips, but for this trip, these two trips, I just didn't have enough vacation to cover the amount of time, so I had to leave my job to do these things.
So this was so important to you. Nature called you to such a degree that you gave up your job to go do this.
Yeah, and it was a pretty good job too. I was sad to leave my company, but it was the only way I could do it, and yeah, to me, it was just worth it to go chase these goals.
All right, can we talk about that? First of all, can we just go back and you tell us a little bit about what your job was before you committed to this trip?
Sure. Yeah, so my job was my first job out of college. It was for this company called Ascent Performance Materials, and I was working as a chemical engineer for the past 6 years, in this plant in Pensacola, Florida.
Yeah, so chemical engineer, great job, everything's going great, but yet you got this call.
Yeah, because I was starting to realize if I don't do these things now, when will I be able to do them? Is it going to be, when I'm 50 or 60? It's hard to get that much time off in your life. And so I knew like the sooner I could act, I'm healthier, I'm younger. It just made more sense to do it as early as possible.
Yeah. Now, right before we hit record on this call, you were telling me about how once you quit your job, you started having some second guessing and some doubts. And tell me
Yeah.
what was going through your mind?
So I felt really confident at first, booking the trip to Nepal to Everest and then the PCT. I was living in an apartment. I ended my lease. I moved everything out of my place into my car. Everything that I couldn't fit, I had to toss and get rid of. So I really started living more minimally. And then I drove all the way to the West Coast to my sister's and to store my things. And it was there where I kind of realized, like, whoa, like I don't have a place to live anymore. All the stuff I own is just in my car, and I'm about to like go live outdoors basically for the next 6 months. Yeah, so that was a big shock. And then finally going on the Pacific Crest Trail, that was my first adventure. I got dropped off on the border, and my Uber driver was getting questioned by Border Patrol. And I felt really bad for him. He was sweating, really nervous. And then they started questioning me once he dropped me off. And there was no one else around. I was totally by myself. And it was actually really windy and kind of chilly. So I had to put my jacket on. And I was kind of second my guess myself. I was like, wow, like I'm out here. I'm really doing this thing. I don't know if it's the right choice. But then after that first day, everything just clicked. And I met those two hikers that I became friends with. And I just started having a really great time and basically had no regrets. But I mean, you definitely go through ways. I mean, even come back, not having a job and trying to go through the job interview process again. You're definitely like lose a little bit of self-confidence. Like, hey, am I able to get another job and a job that I want? So yeah, there's definitely times where it's hard like that and you got to push through.
Yeah, I've just taken some notes here, and I wrote down the word confidence like 5 seconds before you said self-confidence, because I'm thinking, man, like you just have to have like if you don't have confidence, you're going to build it doing what you were doing out there.
Definitely, yeah.
I mean, I'm just so, what were some of the doubts that initially went through your mind?
First was like, hey, maybe I'm not cut out to hike the Pacific Crest Trail. The first couple of days are pretty rough, and it's a lot more weight on your back than you think. And so you're struggling with like back pains, your legs are tired, things like that. And you just feel like maybe you're not cut out for what you're doing. And then also like in the job world, like most people don't leave their job for 6 months to go hiking. And so then you're worried about coming back, like I have this gap in my resume, no one's going to want to hire me, things like that. So you're kind of just like self-doubting. But, you just have to have confidence through those moments and know that, you're going to have a great time out there. You're doing this for a reason because you want to, and holding on to those things is important for sure.
Yeah. So I think this is kind of a funny little path that we're taking here, because you gave up a great job and you went and did this thing, maybe lacking confidence about like whether or not it's going to work out. But ultimately, I'm looking at somebody that's willing to just take a chance and go do this huge thing. And that's like, that alone takes confidence. And I know there's a confidence that you gain when you do these things and you climb Mount Everest. I mean, like what employer wouldn't want to hire somebody that's got that level of confidence?
That's right. And so that's one of the things you just have to realize, like, hey, look at the things I just did with my time off. Like, it's not like you quit your job and then just stayed at home and became a couch potato for the next 6 months. You're doing these amazing things that most people haven't had the opportunity to do. And they're really impressive looking back on it, like you feel really good about yourself. And so it's definitely easy to explain to people why you have a gap on your resume, for instance. Yeah, and it's just, if you think about the things you did and how hard they were and how you persevered, I mean, it's hard not to be, proud of your accomplishments.
Yeah. And so actually just within the last week or so, you've kind of kicked off the interviewing process, and
Yeah.
how's that going?
Yeah, again, I was kind of like not hearing back from companies for the first week or two, and I kind of had self-doubts again. But then all of a sudden I started hearing back from all these jobs that I applied for, and I was like, wow, like, I should be confident in myself. I got all these opportunities awaiting me. And, eventually it's come down to like two companies, and they're both in the area that I want to live in, which is in Colorado. So I'm really excited about that. And, things worked out. And that's kind of like the theme of, I guess, of all this, is that you just trust in yourself and be confident. Everything will work out in the end, whether it's on trail or in the real world.
Yeah. So things working out. I mean, for you, one of the questions that goes through my mind is, you've got this great job. Like, how do you leave this great job? But then how do you not go do these amazing adventures? But then what happens is you came back and you found a great job in a place, Colorado.
Right. Which if you love outdoors, I mean, it's hard to beat, right?
I mean, so you've really figured out a way to like capture the both and to be able to work in that professional environment and still have that nature and have just incredible country and hiking. It's incredible. And I love,
and if I never left on those trips, maybe I never would have had the chance to live in Colorado. Sometimes you just got to take that step and hope things will work out. But if you don't take that step, then you'll never get what you want in your life. So
yeah. So one thing I think probably some of our listeners are wondering, like, you did take a year off, you left your job and it was a whole year off. Like, just financially, how are you able to manage leaving your work and taking a whole year to do this?
Yeah, so I mean, you definitely have to plan it out. I mean, there's some people that don't plan things, but then they get on trail and they run out of money, and they could potentially end their trip early and not be able to complete their life goal. So for me, it was really, maybe 5 years ago that I really thought about climbing Mount Everest, and just trying to live financially, kind of more minimally, and setting money aside every year so I'd have enough in the future to go do something like this, and then just having emergency fund in the back to like fall back upon, while you come back and you're looking for jobs and reintegrating into the real world.
Yeah.
So
Derek, I want to just take you back and think about the Derek from before Scotland, and that Derek compared to the Derek that I'm talking to right now. Like,
okay.
what are the major differences? How have you changed
Oof.
during that time of doing all these adventures?
Yeah, so before Scotland, I was honestly kind of afraid of like I was saying, traveling,
Yep.
experiencing new cultures, being in a setting where I didn't know people. So really, yeah, a lot of like just feeling afraid, having these fears. And post Scotland was really just getting over my fears. Like for instance, after Scotland, my first trip was going to Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa, and I took this international flight out there by myself in this country where I didn't speak anyone's language, and having to deal with that. And so, really, for me, it's just getting out of my comfort zone.
Mm.
I've had a lot of experiences in my life since then that I've really reached out and experienced new cultures, gone on these awesome adventures, and it's just really getting out of your comfort zone.
So it seems to me that for you, it was just taking that first plunge, and it seems
You
like the
realize how great it can
momentum,
be, right?
yeah, it just keeps
Yeah,
getting faster, and you just keep adding more things to the list, and it's incredible.
yeah, definitely self progress, right?
Yeah. So
Measuring yourself against yourself.
there you go. So what advice do you have for people that are listening that maybe have felt that call to nature, that call to adventure, and are kind of second guessing? Well, I can't do
Yep.
that. I have a job, or I have this, or I have that. What advice do you have for them?
Yes, actually, I read the other day something about the two most dangerous words is one day, because if you
Mm,
just keep putting things off and you're like, oh, one day I want to do this, or one day I'll do this. But really, I mean, you need to plan like a specific date for yourself, whether it's like 4 years down the road or, you know, 10 years down the road. Kind of have like the firm date in your mind, where you actually start planning and making it, actual, is important, because otherwise you may not ever do these things that you dream of doing,
yeah.
because you just keep putting it off. You don't have like a firm date.
Yeah. And for you, like Everest was something that you've been planning for quite a while. When did you start? How long ago did you start planning for that?
Yeah, so it's really after Mount Kilimanjaro where I really got into mountaineering, and I kind of wanted to chase the seven summit goal where we climb the highest mountain in each continent. And so it was like, hey, one day I want to make Mount Everest happen. So I want to put money aside, to realize that dream one day. So yeah, so I kind of had a date in mind, maybe like 5, 6 years down the road.
Got it.
I did some financial, analysis kind of thing.
Yep.
So yeah, so that's one of the ways to do it. You don't just say one day. You plan for an actual eventuality,
You pick the date and you start planning for it.
right? And then you can save money and like do the things that matter to help make that goal a reality.
Yeah. Wow. All right. Well, Derek, you've had an incredible run up to this point, and I know that there's lots more to come, but Hollywood's going to make a movie about you at some
Yeah,
point. And I
yeah.
want to know who the actor is going to be that's going to play you in your movie.
Ooh, that's a good point. Actually, honestly, I thinking about this, my trail friend and my trail family had a really good idea, but there's really no like kind of reality TV shows based on around hiking a trail, like through hiking. So I almost think a TV series would be a pretty awesome thing to see about, like, maybe a 10 episode series of someone hiking in the Pacific Crest Trail, how they meet like friends and make a trail family, all the places they get to see and what they have to deal with in terms of hardships. So I think it'd be pretty cool to actually film, an actual trail family that's hiking the trail over the course of their adventure, and kind of make that into a TV series people could see.
Yeah, that would be awesome. What would the series be called?
Ooh. Uh, Actually, I heard this phrase the other day about some people think this trail life is pretty glamorous, but at the end of the day, I mean, you're doing some things that are pretty funny, like you're eating a lot of junk food, for instance. You're not eating very healthy, so maybe like junk food tour of America.
The Junk Food Tour of America
You get to
on the
explore all the different
Pacific
candy
Crest Trail.
bars and things like that out there.
You eat a lot. You gotta get calories, right?
I'll be honest, I probably had 8 or 10 chocolate bars a day, whether it's Snickers or Milky Ways or things like that. You just need the calories because
Yeah,
you're
I
just
mean,
hiking all day long.
you're hiking 25, 30 miles a day. Yeah, you got to do it. Well,
Yeah.
Derek, I can't tell you how much I appreciate this. This has been so much fun, and I've really enjoyed hearing this story. I know I am inspired to get out and do the Pacific Crest Trail at some point in my life. And I just want to thank you for being here today. And to
Oh,
our
thanks, God.
listeners, I hope you've been inspired as much as I have. And I hope that Derek's story has encouraged you to listen to the voice inside you that calls you to adventure. Because we want to hear your story next. If you have a story to tell or you need a nudge to create one, please send me an email. And until next time, I want to encourage you to get outside. Thank you for listening.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott.